two separate different types of cats and hats. You could think of this as a weapon, right? It could look at like this sword of a cat in a hat, or this sword of a cat in a hat, you know? If it's further away, a 1. If it's closer, a 2. This visual might be a 1. No. The background, no. With a few basic changes, we were able to change the entire perception of how our presentation looks, right? Or how just the idea looks. We can use ComfyUI as a demonstration just to give a little bit of a visual idea. We're trying to break down and understand exactly what this node is, for example. All this node is a Python library, just giving you a visual example of what it is. Because at the end of the day, if you want to even create your own Python server or environment, we can do so. And then, so now we've made our environment, which we can then activate. And we're just activating this, right? Similar to how when you are starting ComfyUI, you are activating your environment. And all it is just visual nodes for different GitHub libraries. If I wanted to export an API file, I can do so. And all this API file is it is calling the nodes which go back into the GitHub libraries that we've downloaded, and it's all running within our Python environment. If you were to actually go looking into your ComfyUI folder, we go into our custom nodes, and we can actually find the script that it is, right? And so we can go digging around through these as well and figure out what other processes that they're using, which would probably end up linking into some Python embeds, which would be our environment that we're running our Python in. So just a brief breakdown of what ComfyUI is when you're looking at it. So now we're going to make a clip. So let's make a new one real quick where we're just like moving around a little. So now think of your green screen, right? We're separating it. Kind of similar to how you're pre-processing and separating your foreground from your background. But then there's our lines as well, right? Our outlines, right? Where the light was most hitting, which we're able to track using lines. Then we're able to grab normal maps as well and color maps. And so how these processes are then used to even implement it into programs themselves. Tons of different programs that I've seen recently that utilize these separate processes, but more so in real time in order to grab certain types of data. Like my email, for example. The purpose behind that was to show how we can be grabbing real-time data, right? We can be scrubbing the email address for data, similar to how we can scrub an image for data. Grabbing the information using a series of loops and checks every few seconds that I showed in my video yesterday, which we then use to inject into an LLM, which we can then get a prompt from to make an image. So that's like a more real-time use case. So when we're thinking about these things, we're trying to think of how we're trying to implement each idea into separate different processes, right? So it could be something like creating a video, a rotating video, right? And then using that rotating video to create geometry, right? Or taking a photo and making it into something else, a stylized version of that, right? You could have all sorts of different textures for video games, just procedurally just generating themselves. We have our Comfy server running now, and we can create a button. What does our button do? Quite simple, actually. We push our button. We are running a bat file, which then injects a written line into where the prompt should be. We have our area where we can type. So what we're going to do is now we link ComfyUI and have an image generation then going into photogrammetry, and then we have a check looking in our folder to then import it straight into the game, right? So let's do that, right? We'll do a cat in a Santa hat. See, now this whole process was utilized using the node-based system. The thing about the node-based system is that it is not actually integrated directly into the program itself. So I did want to actually integrate this as like a menu item up top on the bar, or figured as a good example of how you can call Python environments would be to end up just hard coding it in Unity. So now we can achieve running the Python server one of two ways, right? We could either implement it directly into the game itself, or we could run it separately. So for example, if we wanted to implement it right into the game itself or right into the program itself, you could see that we have it running inside the program. However, I do personally like to run it externally. And since it's still calling the same, or since it's still calling the ComfyUI server, the code doesn't change much. So now we have an interface that we've made, right? This interface, what it's going to be doing though, is it's interacting with a bunch of different API files. So in the case of if we want to spawn, like make an image, right? We can do it again. A cat in a hat. Right? And there we have it. Our cat in a hat. We can then take an image, right? And then turn it into photogrammetry. So let's do that. We're going to generate it. And all we're doing here is we're sifting through a folder, right? That we can then pick our image from. And then based off of that image, based off of whatever image is held here temporarily in the memory, we're sending that image to our generation process, right? So when we were looking at those nodes earlier, when we're injecting an image into one of these workloads, right? So what we're doing, we're appending the image input, right? So we're just fixing this area to then be whatever the reference image is, right? So whatever is in the memory here, right? We're creating a folder that has this located within a memory, and then we're taking that file and appending the JSON file, the API file here, and then sending that workload to the ComfyUI server. So that way we're using this image in order to generate the 3D model. Now that it has finished, we have the asset directly in the game, right? And what we can do is, let's say you want to then have things be procedurally generated. You want to take it and then put it onto like procedurally mapping it to specific areas on a plane or specific areas of height elevation, right? You could then do that. But now you can see, you got all these cats. Look at all those cats that have now been randomly generated onto a plane. Like, let's say we wanted to then, right? We now have a new cat, which we have made using control nets. Now let's generate that too. Let's generate our second cat in the hat. And as you can now see, we have successfully generated two separate different types of cats and hats. You could think of this as a weapon, right? It could look at like this sword of a cat in a hat, or this sword of a cat in a hat, you know? Or you could also just think of it for like visual, even like visual learning and stuff like that. Like imagine using these for upscaling and stuff like that for military hardware. Because some of this stuff is using upscaling like the images in order to get a better image so that we can have a better image for generating a 3D model. But if a lot of these things are implemented more so real time, I mean, yeah, it'd be cool. I'd also like to state that by cool, I meant I put on these pair of like big screen VRs the other day, and it made me realize how much better I can see with like a nice quality VR headset screen over like a pair of glasses. That shit needs to be implemented immediately into a pair of glasses, please. Or another use case that I've been thinking of. Sorry, and I wanted to just add this on at the end, but like using AI to help write code that triangulates like the, in this case it's mapping out average climates of Mesopotamia, right? And then we are trying to find similar places in the Americas in order to figure out where would be like the best area for preservation of fossils. I'm half Colombian, so it's crazy how AI can help you just write. I mean, you can use it as a bare bones and then cobble stuff together. So use it, people.